Hi, this is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we are going to talk about some awesome books that are coming up for sale on Heritage next month. Stay tuned. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. Now, I am not sponsored or affiliated with Heritage in any way or anything like that. However, if they would like to give me a discount on some of my purchases, I would not say no. If you're on Instagram following kind of the comic community right now, you may have seen some of these books that have been popping up in pictures recently. And it's from a pedigree that was recently graded called the Promise Pedigree. And it's about 5,000 books, and it's all Golden Age, and they are incredible. And they're coming up on Heritage. The first set of them are going to be sold between June 17th and 19th, but you can see them on their site right now. It's about 300 of those books. And if you're not familiar with the pedigree, generally what a pedigree is what CGC will define it as a pedigree, and it will put a special label on it, and it is books that were bought by an original owner, kind of like off the newsstand. Typically has to be at least 1,000 books, and they're generally Golden Age, but I have seen them up into kind of like the Silver and Bronze Age as well, but they're typically Golden Age. And the story that I read behind this one, there was a story that was written on Bleeding Cool, and it was basically two brothers. One of them was drafted into the Korean War, and the other one joined, signed up with that to go basically with him. And the one that signed up was a big comic collector, and he had basically told his brother, he's like to promise that if something happened to him that he would take care of his collection. And he unfortunately was killed in the war, and so his brother came home and took care of that collection for him. And man, it is a collection, and it is in incredible condition. I mean, this is a collection, if you're familiar with Mile High, the Mile High collection, the Edgar Church collection, I mean, these books are comparable to that. It's not as large as that collection. Like I said, this one's about 5,000. I think the Mile High was 10 to 15,000 books, but I mean, just incredible books. And so I thought it would be fun to, I went through the ones that are up for sale right now, and I picked out 20 of them, and I was just going to kind of show each one of them and talk about where they stand on the census, and kind of like what some prices have been for the same books that have sold, but obviously generally lower grades. And I mean, guessing what they're going to sell for is just, who knows? Because when you get top of the census, it can be hard to guess what some of these books will hit. But some of these, you may have seen some of these books before, maybe you haven't. I mean, there are a couple in here that I'd never seen before, and so like I said, I picked out 20. I just wanted to kind of run through them and give some facts on them. And after this, if you want to go check them out on Heritage's site, just basically go to their site and search for Promise Pedigree, and it should kick out kind of the books that are going to be coming up for sale in that June 17th to 19th auction. So, first book right here is Detective Comics number 140. Now, this is the first appearance of the Riddler from 1948, but this is a 9.6. And this is the single highest copy on the census. There are two at a 9.4, but this is the only one at a 9.6. And there are only 164 Blue Label copies of this book, and so Blue Label means universal, means it hasn't been restored or altered or signed or anything. And a 9.4 in 2003 sold for $19,607, but a 7.5 sold for $40,800 on April 4th of this year. And so, I mean, this is a 9.6. This is way up there, and so this is one of those books that I would expect to break 100,000. Who knows where that's really going to end, though. It's going to get pretty high. Now, the next book. This is the one that me personally, I was blown away when I saw this book. This is the one that, to me, is just, I think this is like the biggest gem of this collection, and that's right here. This is Phantom Lady number 17. This is, I would say, the most desirable Good Girl, kind of like headlights cover comic ever. And it's a Matt Baker cover. It's from 1948. It is a 9.6, the single highest copy. There is one in a 9.4, and there are only 98 Blue Label copies of this book. And that 194 sold for $121,000 in September of 2019. So this is one that I think will likely break 200,000, but I'm really excited to see what that book ends up selling for. Now, it's a book I've always wanted a copy of that book. Every time I see it come up for auction, I've bid on them a few times, but I've never ended up being the person that gets that book. They are so expensive, even in low grades. And so seeing what the highest copy out there ends up going for is gonna be fun to see that one sell. All right, so the next one here is All-American Comics number 61. And this is a pretty rare book. This is the first appearance of Solomon Grundy from 1944. And this is a 9.6. There is 198. And so this isn't the top of the census. There's 198, there's 194, and there's 192. There's only 48 blue label copies of this book, and a 7.0 sold for $30,500 in August of 2020. So there's never been a copy that at least publicly has sold that's this high of a grade. So it'll be really interesting to see what this one ends up going for, because even though we've talked about villain first appearances before, but when you're talking about first appearances of golden age villains like this in a super rare iconic book where he is also on the cover, this is another one that could hit some very, very high numbers. Right, number 4, Captain America Comics number 74. And if you haven't seen this book before, this is one of the most desirable Red Skull covers that's out there. It's from 1949. It's just, Red Skull, super menacing with the big claws. And it's a 9.2. It is the single highest copy on the census. The next closest, so get this, is an 8.0. So you've got 8.5 and 9.0. This is 4 steps above the next highest grade. There's only 65 blue labels out there. 7.5 sold for $27,000 in September of 2019. So this is another one that could hit some real big numbers. I don't know if this one will break 100,000, but it's possible. It is definitely possible with the desirability of these Red Skull covers. All right, next one. This is one I've talked about before, but not in this grade, and this is Startling Comics number 49. This is the classic Alex Schomburg Bender cover. And so, just this cover that looks like Bender from Futurama, 1948. It's a 9.6, and there are actually 5 books out there that are in this grade. So this is tied at the top grade with a Mile High copy. And there are 114 blue labels of this book. The last sale was $34,000 in August of 2019, which that was cheap. That was a total steal for that book. Now the Edgar Church, so that's the Mile High copy, sold for $101,000 in August of 2016. And those Mile High copies, they really do sell for a premium. And so I don't know if this book will beat that one. I imagine it will sell for less than that, but there has been a lot of demand for Schomburg books, these pre-code, type sci-fi, good girl art type covers, and so it's possible it could end up getting up there. But based on that $34,000 sale, I expect us to be somewhere between that, maybe around $75,000, but you never know. And it could be that there's a bunch of people that are interested in this and want to get in on this pedigree, and it could end up hitting records. Okay, now next one is we're going to a World War II Schomburg cover, and that is All Winners, number 12. And this is Captain America attacking or saving prisoners from a Japanese prison camp, 1944. And I wanted to show this one to show how insane this collection is. So this is a 9.8. This is a 9.8 from 1944. And this isn't the only 9.8 in this. There are a bunch of 9.8s in this collection. And so that's where I would recommend kind of going and just kind of scrolling through, because there's a lot of books that I have a hard time even calling them this, but I'll call them filler Alex Schomburg World War II covers. So they aren't particularly known for something, but they're just incredible Alex Schomburg World War II covers, and there are a ton of 9.8s in this collection. It's like they picked these up at the newsstand last week and brought them in to get graded. It is insane. It is totally insane. If I didn't know better, I would think the person who brought this collection in to get graded was literally a time traveler. And that they went back and grabbed these books and even filtered through to find the best ones and then brought them back to now, because they are in such pristine condition. And this is the single highest copy. The next closest is a 9.4. There are only 43 copies on the census. And a 9.4 sold for $20,650 in March of 2019. And that was the highest graded copy at that time. So now there's this 9.8 out there, so it has overtaken that as the highest graded copy. This is the type of book, though, that, like I said, it's not like a key type book. And so these aren't going to hit those stratospheric, or at least I don't think those stratospheric type numbers, the hundreds of thousands of numbers, but they will hit multiple 5 figures. It's probably going to be in the mid 5 figures range. So number 7, this is becoming one of the premier Good Girl Art headlights type covers that's being collected now, and this is Blue Beetle number 54. And this is from 1948. It was used in the Seduction of the Innocent report that was made, that was then discussed at Congress and resulted in the establishment of the Comic Code Authority. And this is a 9.4. There are 3 books tied with this, so including this book at a 9.4. One, again, is a mile-high copy. So I don't want people to think that this collection necessarily blows away Mile High. I mean, I think it puts it into perspective how incredible the Mile High collection is as well. That this collection is competing with it, and it's these incredible high 9 copies of books. And there are only 58 blue labels of this book, and a 9.4 sold in 2011 for $8,962, but that was a long time ago with these types of books. A 6.5 sold for $7,800 in January, and a 1.5 sold for $2,640 on April 26th. So this is becoming a very expensive book. Another one that I would expect to sell probably in the mid 5 figures. All right, now we've got the first L.B. Cole book that I'm going to talk about that's in this group, and this is Contact Comics number 12, and it's a classic L.B. Cole sci-fi rocket cover. He loved to add rockets to a lot of these covers that he did, whether it was just normal 1940s planes, but in this case it's all rockets. It's very futuristic. It's from 1946. It's a 9.6, the single highest copy on the Census. The next closest is a 9.2, and there are 47 blue label copies of this book. And a 9.2 sold for $3,107 all the way back in 2007, but a 6.0 sold for $3,800 in April of 2020. So this is another one of those books that I would expect to hit probably 20 to 30,000 would be maybe a guess that I've got. But again, it's going to be real hard to guess some of these numbers because the books are so far out there from anything else that's sold. Okay, now we're going back to Detective Comics with this one, and this is Detective Comics number 114, and this is a Joker cover from 1946, and it ties the Mile High copy as a 9.8, but the cool thing about this one, and this is one that a lot of people have been talking about, is that it is actually a double cover, which if you're not familiar with double covers, basically it is what it is. There are 2 covers on that book. So if you flipped open the cover, you would see another cover. And the way that those get graded is each cover gets graded, and then the book receives the higher grade of the 2 covers. And so in this case, the external cover is a 9.4, the internal cover is a 9.8, and so that's why this book receives a 9.8. Sometimes the external cover is more presentable than the internal cover. It just happens to be in this case, it's a 9.4 versus a 9.8. Now, there are 67 blue label copies of this book. A 9.8 sold for $23,900 in 2009, so a long time ago. But a 9.0 sold for $18,000 in November of 2020. So we could see some pretty big numbers for this book, being that it's tied the top grade and that it's a double cover, which there are some pretty significant premiums that people will often pay for that because it's a unique but desirable manufacturing error. And so again, this is definitely one that if a 9.0 was going for 18, mid 5 figures, I don't think this one is going to be a $100,000 book, but mid to high 5 figures I think with this one. Okay, now this next book, this one's pretty rare, and so maybe not everybody has seen these books, but this is Sun Girl number 1, and this is a very desirable Good Girl Art cover from 1948. It's a 9.8 again. It is the single highest graded copy. The next closest is a 9.0, so much better than even the next closest copy. Only 44 blue label copies on the Census, And that 9.0 sold for $5,400 back in 2017. And a 7.5 sold for $2,640 in 2020. So this could be a book that's maybe like reachable by like a normal person. Like maybe it'll go for 15,000, 20,000, somewhere in like the AF-15 type range. But again, single highest copy by a lot. We could see some pretty big numbers again for this book. I expect lower 5 figures for this one. All right, now we've got another L.B. Cole cover, a classic cover. This is Catman Comics number 28. This is one of the most desirable covers from the Catman Comics run. And this is from 1945, is a 9.4, tied for the highest grade. And the next closest is a 7.5. I mean, that's why this is just so ridiculous. I mean, the next closest copy being so much lower in grade. It's a dark cover, so obviously very difficult to get in high grade. It is an amazing cover, kind of like a pre-code horror type cover. It's only 34 blue label copies on the CGC Census, and that next closest 7.5 sold for $8,100 in August of 2019. So it's another one that I expect to see at least in the low 5 figures, if not getting into the mid 5 figures for this book. Okay, so the next one, this is a pretty cool book. This is Eerie Comics number 1. And this is considered to be the first dedicated horror comic. And it's from 1947. It's a 9.2, which it ties with 3 other books for the highest graded copy. There are 78 blue labels on the Census, and a 9.2 sold for $9,560 back in 2012. But a 9.0 sold for $11,400 in September of last year. So definitely expect to see the low 5 figures for this book, maybe hitting around 20,000, but again, with the opportunity to own one of the highest graded copies, you can see some crazy prices sometimes. So it'll be interesting to see what this one goes for, since these pre-code horror books have a lot of dedicated, collectors behind them. So this is one that I'm sure a lot of people are going to be looking at. All right, next is one of the most desirable L.B. Cole covers that exists. This is Mass Comics number 1. From 1945, and this is an 8.5, which, I mean, maybe this looks, like garbage compared to the other books, the 9.2s, the 9.4s, the 9.8s, but this is the single highest copy of this book. The next closest is a 7.5, and there are only 57 blue label copies on the Census. I love this cover. It is an incredible cover. It's got a lot of black, so tough to get in high grade. There's also a Mass Comics number 2, in a 7.5 that is the second highest behind 2 that are in an 8.0. But the highest that had come up for sale in that Mass number 2 is a 6.5, and it sold for $9,600 in 2019. So I think we're going to see some real big numbers for both of these books. Probably at a minimum in the $20,000 to $30,000 range, and it very likely could go higher than that. All right, this auction does have a lot of great L.B. Cole books in it. This is one that right here, Power Comics number 3. I've talked about this run of books before because I actually did an unboxing of Power Comics number 4. It was kind of like a red cover with an eagle on it. This is, I'd say, the most desirable cover in this run. And it's a 9.6, ties with 1 other book for the highest graded copy. There are only 32 blue labels on the Census. And a 7.5 sold for $12,000 on January 17th of this year. So I expect to see some pretty big numbers with this book. Again, mid 5 figures probably for this book. All right, now we've got another pre-code horror book, and this is one I'd actually never seen before. This is a cool cover, and this is Punch Comics number 19, and 1946. It's got this crazy bloody claw cover with a bunch of dead bodies on the cover. I mean, this stuff, it's pretty gruesome. I mean, this is, gotta remember, this is the mid 40s, and this is a 9.6, single highest graded copy. Next closest is a 9.0. There are only 15 blue label copies on the Census, so this is not a common book to come across. Now, it's not a super expensive book, at least in some of the grades that we've seen sell, but it hasn't sold for a long time, so that's tough to say what this is going to go for. An 8.0 sold for $2,629 in November of 2016, so I have no idea what this book is going to go for. I mean, it could be that it doesn't break 10,000. It could be that it gets again into kind of those low to mid five figures. We'll see. It'll depend who's there and who wants this book. But this is one that I'll be interested to watch what that book ends up selling for. All right, so now I'm down to the last five. So this is number 16. This is again Detective Comics number 122. Here, this is the first Catwoman cover from 1947. And it's her beating up Robin, you know, getting scratched by Catwoman. And it's a 9.0 that's tied with 4 other books of this grade. And there is one graded at a 9.4. So it is not top of the census. There are 94 blue label copies of this book. But an 8.0 is the highest that's ever been sold publicly, at least from the records on Go Collect. And that one sold for $8,351 in November of 2017. So this one, with how prices have increased over the last few years, a very important Batman book, you know, like I said, first Catwoman cover. This is another one that definitely will break 5 figures, and I think could easily get up into the $20,000 to $30,000 range, if not higher than that. Now this next one, number 17, is one that you may not be familiar with. Now this is Miss America Magazine number 2. So this is volume 1, number 2. And the unique thing about this book is this is the first appearance of Patsy Walker. It's from 1944, and she is the person that eventually becomes Hellcat. And so look in the picture of Avengers there, where it's her cover where she first becomes Hellcat. But her first appearance as a character is all the way back in 1944 in this magazine. This is a 9.4. It is tied for the highest graded copy with one other book from a different pedigree, from the Carson City pedigree. And the next closest behind that is an 8.0, so this is way up there. And there are only 13 blue label copies of this book, so it is very rare. And that 9.4, the other 9.4, sold for $16,800 in November of 2019. So I expect that this one will see at least that price and will likely exceed it, getting up near 20, maybe more than that. All right, now I wanted to show one of these books. This is Planet Comics number 39. This is a popular, again, Good Girl Art cover, and this is a book that mere mortals might be able to purchase that is in this pedigree. This is from 1945. It's a 9.2. There are 3 at this grade, and there's also 194 and 196, so it is not the top of the census. There are 59 blue labels, and a 9.2 sold for $3,550 in February of 2020. So this is a book that is actually within a reasonable price range that someone could probably pick up, where they don't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars. Now, there are other copies of books that are in this pedigree that aren't going to all hit, you know, 20, 30, 100,000. These are just the ones that I'm focusing on here for this, but this is a cool Planet Comics cover, a popular cover that I think could actually be achievable for someone to go after. Now this next one, this is another Good Girl Art cover. This is Clairvoyant number 3, and I picked this one because this cover is insane. It is crazy. It is a dude pistol whipping a bride. It's from 1947. I don't know why this is the cover of a comic, but it is. And this is the single highest graded copy at a 9.0. The next closest is an 8.0. There are only 21 blue label copies. An 8.0 sold for $2,605 in June of 2019. So this is another book that may end up being achievable for someone to get if they want this book. But again, being the top graded copy, being in the 9s, you never know what that final price is going to come at if there are a couple people or a few people that want this book and are bidding back and forth. All right, so I'm down to the last book. It's number 20, and I wanted to close out with just kind of a cool one. So this is Captain America Comics number 36, and it's this crazy cover of Cap flying over this car where they're driving off with Hitler, and he's picking him up out of the car. It's from 1944. This is a 9.4. It is the single highest graded copy, with the next closest being 2 copies that are at a 9.0. And a 7.0 of this book sold for $12,305 in 2020. So this is a book that could hit some pretty big numbers, kind of get into those mid 5 figures numbers, because these World War II covers, especially ones that feature Hitler, Nazis, that kind of thing, those end up typically demanding a pretty significant premium. And again, this is the single highest copy and a 9.4 at that. So I expect this one to hit some pretty big numbers. All right, so if you enjoyed checking out these books, because I have really had fun going through these different books and looking at all the ones that are out there, and I am looking forward to seeing the rest of that collection come up for sale, because like I said, this is only 300 books approximately that are in this auction from June 17th to the 19th. The total pedigree is about 5,000 books, and from my understanding, Heritage is going to be selling this pedigree over the course of about the next year. So there are going to be a lot of auctions that feature these books or have these books present in them. So it's definitely something to watch for if you're looking to pick up a book from this pedigree. Keep an eye on those different Heritage auctions, and you might, see one that you're interested in and one that's affordable depending on what your price ranges are, for these books. And but yeah, just incredible books, super fun to look through. Recommend, just even if you're not interested in buying them, going and flipping through the pictures that are on Heritage's page just to see what there is, and maybe watch the auction that goes on from the 17th to the 19th just to actually watch these books sell, see what kinds of prices they end up hitting. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I thought these were fun to talk about. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. Hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this, and I will see you in the next video.